Okay, quick little quiz for everybody in the room. If I was to say, what did you remember learning first about George Washington? Say things out loud. Anyone? Did not tell a lie, first president. What else? Father of our country. Wooden teeth. Cherry tree, yes. So some of these are true, some of these aren't. One of the things that, whether they are mythical or true, the things about George Washington, one of the things I've learned in my, I guess, second half of life has been his ability to step down. And I've been doing a lot of research on George Washington over the past 5 years, and he was the president and the general during the Revolutionary War. And after the war was over, he could have stayed, but he chose not to. And he served 2 terms as president, and he could have gone for another, but he chose not to. And so when King George III got to get his portrait done by the same person that had done Washington's, Benjamin West, he wanted to get like an inside scoop into what might potentially be happening in the future. And so he asked Mr. West, King George asked Mr. West, what are Washington's plans next? Kind of hoping for an insight. And West said, rumor is he is going to step down and return to the farm. And then King George famously said, if he does this, he will surely be the most important person and respectable man ever to have lived. Because he was willing to step down. We get our word humility from the Latin word humus, which just means dirt, to lower oneself to the ground, to live in a way where you are not puffing yourself up. The Greek god Narcissus was told that by his parents that parents were told by another god that he would be falling because of his great beauty that he was born with. And they begged the gods and said, what is it that we can do so that he lives long into his life? And they said, just as long as he does not see his reflection. And so they kept mirrors away from him. And then one day when Narcissus was out in the forest, he came upon a pool of water. He looked on it and he forever fell in love with himself. See, something that we pride ourselves on almost as Americans is achievement, is actually a building up, climbing ladders, winning gold medals. And Jesus, the scene we're going to read today, he comes in on this conversation that we are coming in on this conversation he's having with a couple of his disciples and their mom. And he's going to say, we got to turn that upside down. Because in God's kingdom, it is not about who is first. So now we are going to read from the Gospel of Matthew, the 20th chapter, starting at the 20th verse. And hear now the word of our Lord. The mother of the sons of Zebedee came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked a favor of him. And he said to her, what do you want? And she said to him, declare that these 2 sons of mine will sit one at your right and one at your left in your kingdom. But Jesus answered, you do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink? They said to him, we are able. He said to them, you will indeed drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left, that is not mine to grant, but it is for those to whom it has been prepared by my Father. When the 10 heard it, they were angry with the other 2 brothers. Jesus called them to him and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. It will not be so among you. But whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. This is the word of our Lord. This mama takes the concept of a helicopter parent to a whole new level. Her sons, James and John, they're two of the disciples, and what we know from other parts of the gospel story is that they are kind of in the inner circle, along with Peter. And there's this scene where Jesus says to them, you two and Peter, you three come with me up on the mountain because something big's about to happen. And then they go up there and the cloud descends, and then Moses and Elijah, they get to see them. You're telling me you wouldn't tell your mama that happened to you? They did. They come down, they tell their mom, and she begins to think, okay, there is something I can do here to secure their future. And so, wouldn't you tell your mom? Yesterday, Charlie and I took our middle child to college, and our oldest child drove himself to go move into his first apartment. And so the whole day I was just praying for them, just praying that, they make good choices, praying for their safety, praying that they aren't too homesick, but a little homesick, because I want to know that they miss me. So James and John's mom comes to Jesus, and with that, my son is better than your son, Mama Bear attitude, she asks, not for their success in this world, not for their safety. She says, can you actually secure them into eternity? One to be at your right and one to be at your left. And Jesus responds with a soft no. He first says, I don't think you really realize what you're asking. Like, that means that they would have to go through immense suffering. And besides, I don't even get to choose that. Only the Father gets to choose that. Well, apparently, the other disciples were eavesdropping on that conversation. And so they come in and they are angry. And I wonder, are they angry because they didn't have a mama that was willing to go and ask? Have you ever been that kid whose friends' parents were willing to go and get stuff for you? They were willing to go get stuff for their kids, but your mom was the one that was like, I'm not going to get involved in that. And I wonder if they got a little mad because, maybe he might get something that we don't. They might get to be teacher's pet. And wouldn't it be nice to be the teacher's pet? But Jesus is keenly aware of what is going on in their hearts and minds, and he uses this as an opportunity for a faith life application right there. He's going to nip it in the bud. And this is what he says. He says, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. So I just want to remind us about what a typical Roman leader would be modeling for this area of the world. So Herod is the magistrate at the time. He is the governor of this area, and the emperor is Tiberius during this period of time. Now, Tiberius never came down into this Palestine area. He wouldn't have come down into there. But Herod wanted to set something up in this region of Palestine so that Tiberius would think he had been recognized. And so Herod has this idea, I'm going to build a resort town on the Sea of Gennesaret. And it's a good spot because it looks out over this lake. It's just like a beautiful lake village. And very close to that are these mineral baths, these thermal baths, which you can go to this day in the town of Emmaus. And then he's going to build the city, and guess what he's going to name it? He's going to name it after the emperor. He's going to name it Tiber. But in order for this city to be built, Herod needs slaves to build it. And it's not like people are just willingly coming and saying, sure, we will be your slaves over the course of the next 20 years as you build this. No. So he went and he stole people. He stole the poor. He stole the disenfranchised. He stole the ones that lived on the margins and forced them into slavery to come and build his city for his emperor. This is the type of leader that is modeled for our first century disciples. Being recognized, climbing the ladder, trying to please the highest authority in the land, residing in a beautiful and large home with lots of people to take care of you. This is what it meant to be at the top. But in Jesus' kingdom, he invites them, I'm going to say commands them, into a different perspective. It will not be so among you. Whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first must be your slave. Living as a follower of Christ means living as a servant. And all of us that follow Christ are called to this service. This is a call not to increase, but to decrease. Not decrease as in thinking less of who you are as a child of God, but not realizing that you are any better than anybody else. Jesus uses two Greek words. The first is servant, diakonos. It's where we get our English word for deacon, which is one of the services, the officers of the church that we serve. And it literally means someone who serves food and drink, someone who waits on others. It is where we get our word for deacon, one of those elected officers in the church. And it means someone who is willing to consider not ignoring your own needs, but considering while you are meeting needs of yourself, who else might need this? Who else might be by needing this food, this care, this welcome? And then he uses the word doulos, which means slave. Someone that is owned by another, someone who serves regardless of their own interests. Last week, Stacy challenged all of us to consider how we can be like Philip was with the Ethiopian. How Philip happened upon an Ethiopian in a carriage, and he chose to just get into the carriage with him. He wasn't qualified. He wasn't even a Jew, and he just was like, I want to get in there and I want to come alongside you. Because sharing knowledge, sharing this faith is important. And it's so important for us to mentor, to teach, and to pass on the knowledge and love of this faith with the next generation. And then she put it bluntly. She said, stop saying no. In case you weren't here, I'll say it again. She said, stop saying no. And I want to make sure you know this. If you have thought to yourself, someone else will do it, that is probably God saying you should do it. Because it doesn't happen like that. There has never been a time in my ministry where I am having hordes of people saying, I have just been called to serve in blankety blank. Nope, we are always looking for more. The harvest is truly plentiful. And the laborers are plentiful, maybe just a bit timid. So I want you to be sure to know something about this church. If you have been a member here for a long time, you don't know that we have 5 expectations for membership. The first is that you would worship weekly. The second is that you would pray daily. The third is that you would study in community. The fourth is that you would give generously. And the fifth is that you would serve wherever you are. Live as a servant in your home, in your neighborhood, in your school, on your teams, in your bands. Serve, because that is not what the Westlake Hills Presbyterian Church thinks is right, or what your session thinks is right, or what your leaders or your pastors. It's what Jesus told us we're supposed to do. Jesus embodied this. Jesus lived this. We are supposed to not come to be served, but to serve. So there's this other story about George Washington that I've always loved. It's a rainy day during the Revolutionary War, and George Washington is riding through on his horse, and he comes upon a group of soldiers who are trying to lift a very heavy beam into place, and it keeps slipping, and they're having a hard time, and he notices that the corporal is just barking orders at them. And so George asks him, why are you not helping? And he says, don't you know I am a corporal? And George gets down, realizing this guy has no clue who he is. And so George gets off of his horse and he gets down and he begins to help these men. And when they have lifted the beam into place, he gets back on his horse and he says, hello, I just want you to know for the future, if you are ever in need help, if you ever are in need of help, please feel free to always call on your general, Washington. May it be so in my life and in yours.